Welcome everyone to another short video of our environment setup series. I'm Pablo Martinez and I'm a software craft person at Codurance. Today we're going to work with IntelliJ and Java. IntelliJ is our preferred tool for working with Java. However, if there's another IDE you'd like us to cover, please let us know in the comments and we'll take it into account for future videos. For this video, I'm assuming that you have already downloaded IntelliJ and Java. We're going to be using Gradle, so it would be great if you have already downloaded Gradle too. Remember that Gradle is a build automation tool, not only for Java, but for other languages, which is used for building, compiling, testing, and even deploying your application. Let's start. Let's open IntelliJ and create a new project. I'm going to call it Hello World, and I'm going to store it in desktop repos. Also, this is going to be .Codurance, and I'm going to be using the 17th version of Java. Let's create a project and let's wait a little bit for, let's wait a little bit for Gradle and IntelliJ to set up the project for us. Let's see what files were created. There's a .gradle folder. This is where the Gradle source code is located. There's a .idea folder. This is where the default behavior and the default configuration of our IDE is stored. Then there's the Gradle folder. The interesting file here is the Gradle wrapper properties. This is the version of Gradle we're using. In case you wanted to change it, you could just modify this URL with the latest version of Gradle. I'm going to do it and build the application again. So Gradle daemon starts. And the build was successful with the newest version. We also have the SRC folder, where the main and test subfolders are located. Main is where we will write our source code, and test will contain our tests. We will try to mimic the main folder structure or module structure in the test subfolder. Gitignore, you are probably familiar with it, has all the files. We do not want Git to commit. Build Gradle contains something that is very interesting. Is one of the configuration files of Gradle, and it contains the dependencies that we are going to be using. For example, these two dependencies were automatically included. These are for testing, and they're slightly underlined. This means that these dependencies are not the latest ones. If you right-click on them and click on Show Context Actions, you'll have the option to upgrade to the latest version. Let's do that. You can also use the shortcut, Alt-Enter. And that's it. We've upgraded our dependencies. You can click there and build again the project. Settings.gradle is another of the configuration files for Gradle, where we're just specifying the project name. There's also the gradlu and gradlu-byte files. Those are script files that are very handy for writing, for executing commands regarding Gradle. For example, we could write gradlu build, and we could build our application from the command line. We could also run gradlu test to run the tests. Since there are no tests, it was successful. Let's create our hello world function. So I'm going to create a module here. It's going to be com.codurance, and I'm going to create a Java class. It's going to be called Hello World. Yes, I do want to add it to Git, and I'm going to create the public static void main function, which is going to be your entry point, and I'm going to type Hello World. This is going to be a message that will be printed to our console. Let's run this code. Here we are. Hello World was printed. You can also use the shortcut Shift F10 to execute the code. Remember that the public static void main function is a very specific function that will be your entry point for the application. If we wanted to add code tests, we could add them here. For now, we will not. We will do it after. Something else that I like very much doing in my setup is to create an editor config file. This editor config file, and I have here what I want. It's a file that is supposed to be committed and is very handy when you're working in a project with more people. Let's see what this file does. This specifies that the end of line is going to be LF, regardless of the operating system you're using. Remember that Windows, and I'm a Windows user, as you can see, does not use LF as the default for line ending, it uses CRLF. However, as people might be using different operating systems, it's good to specify the one you want. I'm using spaces, I'm using 4 spaces. I do not want to insert a final new line on files. I want to use UTF-8, and I do want to trim trailing white spaces. For YAML files, I will use an indent size of 2, and for Java, JSON, YAML, XML, and Markdown files, I will be inserting a new empty line at the final of each of the files. Remember to commit this file. Something else that I like doing, but only for Windows users, this is if everyone's using either Linux or Mac, this is not required, is a file called git attributes. The git attributes file, and again, let me copy and paste from here, is a file that specifies that Git should change all the files when committing to LF as the line ending. If not, the default behavior of Git is to change in Windows the line ending of files to CRLF. So you might be having problems if you specify something in your editor config and you're using Windows without this file. This text auto, what does is that it only modifies the end of line for files that are texts, not binary files. And auto means that Git automatically detects which files are binary and which files are texts. Something else that I like doing when working with IntelliJ is to go to Settings and Actions on Save. Well, it's here. Actions on Save is something that will be executed every time you save a file. So every time I save a file, I want to reformat the code. I want to optimize imports, and I want to rearrange the code. Let's see what this does. Let's go to our hello world function. Let's say I created many empty lines here. If I click Ctrl S, which will save my file, look what happened. It removed those unnecessary empty lines. Same here. Let's say I have unnecessary tabs and I tap Ctrl X. It modifies the file, and this is very handy for keeping your code nice and clean. This is using, by the way, the default behavior that you have in your idea folder. To modify that behavior, you can go to Settings and configure the scope, configure for Java, you can modify the default behavior. Like, for example, I do not want line breaks, or you can have a look at it here. Spaces. I want spaces about an if parenthesis. All of this, you can modify it here. I like the default behavior and I'm not modifying it. Let's see if what else is needed. Yes. There's something else very important, which is if you go to project structure here, you can modify the SDK you're using, and you can even download a new one. Let's say I wanted to use Java 11. I could do it very easily by just clicking here. And let's say I want to use Oracles 11. I could download it and change to that one. Just to end with this part, there's a way of extending the functionality of your IDE, which is with they're not called extensions, they're called plugins. With plugins, you can extend the functionality of your IDE with plugins. For example, there's the Kubernetes plugin. In case you're using Kubernetes a lot, this plugin is very helpful. You can search for plugins, and the most used ones appear here already. You can see the ones I have already installed. Now, let's use Codurance default template for working with Java. which you might find very useful. So I'm going to go to this URL, which you'll find in the comments, in the description of the YouTube video. This is a GitHub repo by Codurance, which is used for us when working on katas. It contains the templates for all the projects. So I'm going to clone this project. I'm going to probably clone it in desktop repos. It already exists. Let me delete it. It will only take a second. Yeah, this is the one. I'm going to clone it, and I'm going to open IntelliJ on this project. I have set up a shortcut to open IntelliJ on a specific project, in a specific folder. However, this is opening. Oh, I did wrong. I opened all the folder. Let's do it in a different way. Let's click open, and let's search for the project I want to open. It's in desktop repos, and it's called the Katalyst Quick Start. Here I have all the languages, but I want to use the Java template. Java, we have two templates for JUnit 5 and JUnit 4. I'm going to use JUnit 5 since it's the latest one. So I'm going to open this project. I want to open it as a Gradle project, and I'm going to open it in this window. Gradle will take a few seconds. Yep, it was successfully built, and here you'll find some code that it's very handy to start learning Java. For example, this includes tests, and you have many different kinds of tests, with some nice comments explaining which each of the tests does, with parameterized tests, non-parameterized tests, etc. And in the main folder, you have models, you have how to use a repository, how to use a service, etc. I find this repo very useful for starting learning Java, and especially useful if you're going to do one of our katas. I suggest using this template. Thank you very much for being here with me for this short video, and hope you enjoy it. See you in the next one.